Hello, in today's episode I make some hot graphite cubes, I paint a Russian truck, and then I crash it into a fence. Also that I can make a scene where some guys are standing questionably too close to those spicy cubes, but at least they're warm. The main focal point of the diorama is going to be a truck crash in the center of it, so I 3D printed one. Using these three colors, I wanted to make a bluish green for the base color. I ended up adding a little too much blue for my liking, but luckily we're going to lighten this up anyway, so it's not too big of a deal. Speaking of lightening, I used Tamiya buff and added that directly to the mixture. I focused on a modeling technique, not trying to get full coverage, but really just haphazardly making small little swirls here and there, just trying to break it up a little bit. Again, just trying to add some visual texture to the panels just to make them a little bit more interesting than just pure boring panel lines. I think it came out okay, but it does kind of read more like a camouflage in certain areas, but I'm pretty happy with it. Then going in with a darker gray color, I painted all the tires and all the bits and pieces that I wanted in a dark gray. Moving on from there, I focused on the wooden deck for the bed of the truck. To do that, I went with a darker brown color for the base color and just progressively got lighter with smaller and smaller strokes, and then finally landing on a light sandy color for the smallest lines. And then to finish it off, I gave it a dark black wash just to help emphasize the panel lines and tone everything down a little bit. It was then time to pin wash. For this, I used dark winter streaking grime and applied it to all the spots grime would naturally want to occur. To help blend it, I just used some mineral spirits until I get the look I'm going for. As opposed to much of my other stuff, I wanted to keep this a little bit more reserved and show that it was more being used recently and taken care of. So I've had to show a lot more restraint than usual, which is hard for me. I'm working on it. Moving on. I started off with some empty walls, and those walls are none other than the Soviet wall P0-2. I can't believe I even looked up the name for that. I can't believe it even has a name. Anyway, I painted it using some deck tan, one of my go-to colors for any concrete color, and then I gave it a thorough wash with another darker gray color. Once it was dry, I then added a dirtier brown color for some of that earth weathering. And then for all the raised portions, I went back over with that original deck tan just to lighten it back up a little bit to emphasize where the light would catch. With the main features now finished, I needed a base to put them all on. For that, I used my Proxon we have at home and went about creating the rough shape for the base. Then it was time to apply the ground texture. For this, I just used my homemade version of Sculpt the Mold. Check out my last video if you want to see a more in-depth tutorial on how I make it. But again, it's just blown attic insulation, blended in a blender, add some plaster of Paris, and applied. I just use my hands to mix it, but you can also totally use a pink little cup with a popsicle stick and wear gloves if you want to as well. While the ground texture was still wet, I embedded the walls into the ground a little bit just so that way it wouldn't look like it was floating on top of it, but actually physically in the ground. Then using a rubber tire, I then rolled it across the surface, just kind of creating little ruts and divots into the road, showing that it's been used a bunch over time. Then I moved on to applying the dirt texture. For this, I tried something a little bit different than I normally do. Instead of letting it dry while it was all wet, I just applied some glue on top and applied the dirt texture as I normally would, using the paint can and a stocking method. This is just dirt from my backyard, and I'm trying to get the finest powder possible. And while it was still wet, I found some larger pebbles, again from my backyard, and I scattered them around the surface. And remember, rocks don't float unless they're witches. So in that case, I just embedded them or massaged them into the surface. Once it was dry, it was then time for some static grass. For this, I just used some PVA glue and applied it haphazardly here and there. kind of going for that patchy look, working in smaller sections to avoid the glue from drying out. Then using a static grass applicator, I applied the grass in several passes. I'm pretty sure this is 7mm static grass from Woodland Scenics of the light green Persuasion, but the color really isn't that important because I will be painting it nonetheless. Once I was happy with the static grass, I then primed it all black. I wanted a really dark, deep green grass, so I chose my darkest green and applied that as the base layer. That black primer will really help create fake shadows in the grass, make it look a little bit deeper, so not getting full coverage is okay. I then used a lighter green color to highlight here and there. One of the downsides of painting it all black means that it's kind of hard sometimes to see what the actual color of the grass will look like, especially contrasted with the dirt work. So I like to go back and start painting the ground once I'm happy enough with the grass. It then allows me to kind of read the grass a little bit better. So I started painting the dirt with a dark brown color. I then used a lighter color, in this case Tamiya Buff, to help break up that base tone, and focused more on the raised portions. And then for the most raised portions, I used some Tamiya Deck Tan, using this a little bit sparingly, again focusing on those extreme raised portions. Then it was time for arguably the most relaxing part of the whole build, and that's painting some rocks. Yes, painting rocks. For some reason, I just really enjoy it. It also gives such a crazy amount of texture to the base. And all I use is a couple of earth tones and some dark and light grays. We went through the effort of putting them there in the first place, and painting them just really makes them pop. This has been my abbreviated TED Talk. Thank you for coming. Now back to your scheduled programming. Fence time. I created the rough shape of the fence using some of the styrene, and for the chain link fence portion of it, I'm going to use some tulle fabric, Tulle. Once I was happy with the general shape of it, I needed to make it look like it was crashed into. For this, I just ended up bending, trying not to break the styrene, but kind of just gently coaxing it in directions that kind of made sense. But if it breaks, it's not too big of a deal either, because a truck crashed into it. Kind of makes sense for it to be broken. Once it was glued in place, I decided to paint it up. For this, I just chose a rusty base color and sprayed it on, trying to avoid all the grass. I followed this up with sponging on some light gray here and there, just to kind of show some of that old non-rusted surface, and to again add more texture. I finished it off using an enamel light rust wash, again sparingly here and there, just to help add more visual appeal. I figured the truck would be transporting some stuff, so I printed out some wooden crates and painted them up the same way I painted the truck bed. I also painted up some old oil drums and weathered them appropriately. See, I only said I was going to be reserved about the truck, didn't say anything about the fence or the oil drums. Switching gears back to the truck, I wanted to add some dust effects to the bottom of the truck. So I applied some dry earth from MIG. It's from their splashes range, so it actually has a little bit of texture to it. And I focused it on the tires and the underside of the truck. Just using some mineral spirits to help blend it here and there, to eventually getting something that I was looking for. Now that the truck was nice and dirty, I needed to help blend that with the surface to help make sure that they would kind of match together, so I started weathering the base. For this, I'm just using 3 different colors, a dark, a medium, and a light color. The light being the same color as the truck. I'm applying all these enamels while they're wet, allowing them to kind of naturally blend together, and then to further blend them using some mineral spirits. And then as a finishing step, going back to that lightest color, I highlighted or dry brushed on to the actual most raised portions, just to give that crispness back. As I called them in the beginning, these spicy graphite cubes, I wanted to make some remnants of a nuclear reactor that had a rapid, unscheduled dismantling. So to make these graphite cubes, I just used some artist's charcoal and drilled the ends out with a Dremel. Sometimes they would shatter, which just only helps enhance the look, and then I would cut them to size, which then further enhances the look. Once I had all my pieces, I started gluing them in place. I then needed some unfortunate souls to stumble upon this mess. For this I found some cool Spetsnaz units, and if you're curious, I'll put a link to them down below. Painted them up following the Gorka suit, or it was inspired by the Gorka suit, so it's my interpretation of that. I then applied that dust tone that I had done for the truck and the base to their feet just to help blend them in further. I placed the figures, gave it a coat of black paint, and then this one was finished. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm actually really happy with the way this one turned out. Not happy with how long it took for this video to come out, but broken record at this point. So yeah, thank you guys so much for making it this far into the video. If you like what you saw and you want to see some more, click here. And if not, I'll catch you in the next one.